Hey guys, welcome back. So this is going to be, I think, our last video in this week on grand theories part one. Next week we'll be dealing with some other grand theories that I think are going to be a little bit more useful in terms of analytical tools. But for right now, let's finish this. So this time we're dealing with conflict theory, whereas both structural functionalism and grand systems theory kind of took the premise, at least in the background of everything, that life within the society is pretty orderly, with the exception of Robert Merton. Everybody else is kind of takes for granted that things are stable. Conflict theory says exactly the opposite. Things are not orderly at every moment. Because there are imbalances of power, there is at least the potential for conflict. It could happen at any moment. And the whole fact that society is held together at all, which structural functionalism just sort of takes as a given, conflict theory says it's held together because of coercion. People don't have the same values and norms necessarily. What they have is they have being in a position of either coercing and dominating somebody or being coerced and being dominated in any particular social structure. So what we're going to deal with is, first of all, whereas in general systems theory, the structural functionalism doesn't talk a whole lot about change. In general systems theory, change comes as a matter of adapting to what's going on in the external environment. For conflict theory, internal sources of change. People are getting screwed over and they don't like it, and so they hopefully don't rebel in a violent way, but they at least protest and argue for changes to the way the social structures are working. The order, as I said, comes through coercion, and in particular, Ralph Dahrendorf is sort of our main person here. He says that the whole reason that you have any social conflict is that there are imbalances in authority. Some people are in positions of authority over other people, which means some people have the experience of dominating people below them, and some people have the experience of being dominated by the people above them. And he says this imbalance in authority, this authority and dominance, is what creates conflict. I'm going to pause it right there just to let you consider the fact that I personally think this is a kind of perceptive way of thinking about any social structure. Right now, we don't really dwell, well, I don't, you do, dwell on the fact that I'm in a position of authority over you. I dominate you in the sense that I make you do things that you have no interest in doing. You don't want to watch this video, and you don't want to write reflection journals, and you don't want to take tests, you don't want to do discussion posts. I don't blame you, but this is a situation of conflict. I make you do those things that you don't want to do. And what Dahrendorf says is that in every social structure, there are people above and people below. And that, as soon as you remove egalitarianism from human existence, or from at least human existence within a particular society, you've got conflict. It may not be blown up at any particular moment. It may be what he calls latent conflict, but it exists there. And so, let me move my script down a little bit. What he says is, here's the basic conflict. The people in the dominant position, me, want to keep the status quo. I want you to do what I tell you to do, and I don't want you to argue about it, and I don't want things to change because that's a threat to my way of life. You, in a subordinate position, would love to have change. How great would it be if you got to decide how you were evaluated? You would probably prefer that, and in which case that makes it potentially more difficult for me and easier for you, and that is the source of our conflict. He says that this conflict, I told you this already, is latent at all times. You feel it right now in a way that I hope you forget about after you watch this video so that you don't make my life difficult. But here's the thing about it. Let me see. Oh, okay. So we've gone through this. We have order through coercion. I coerce you into doing this by telling you that I'll fail you out of school if you fight against me. The authority and dominance create the conflict. Here's the situation at the end, and this is where my little example of you and me kind of fails. In different social structures, we all take part in different ones, right? Different social structures lead to different subordinates. So we can imagine an example where, let's take an example of being in the National Guard. Let's say that I decide that I want to be part of the National Guard, and you already are part of a National Guard. It's possible that I show up there and you are my superior officer. And this is what Dahrendorf means about, in a different structure, there might be a different subordinate. In the structure of education, I am clearly the superior, the superordinate, and you are the subordinate. But the National Guard gives us an example of a situation in which those roles might be reversed. Same two individuals, but different positions. And what that is meant to illustrate is the fact that if you take our relationship of superordination and subordination and think about the fact that it's not going to be the same people who are always going to be in conflict with each other. It's not always me on top and you on the bottom. In different social structures, I might be on the bottom and you might be on the top. And in other social structures, it may be that I'm part of it and you're not part of it at all. And I am superior in some of them and subordinate in others. So what he says is, this is the point of this whole excursion, is that society is crisscrossed with these conflicts. And in every single one of them, it may be a latent conflict, and it may be one where people in subordinate positions are saying, hey, you know what, this doesn't seem right to me. We should advocate for ourselves for change. And that's the whole thing with conflict theory. Conflict is always present. It might just not be being acted on, but all social structures are contingent. They are dependent on this conflict either being suppressed or people in the superordinate position putting it down. But it's always, every single social structure could the next day be fought over and changed, or have the fight be suppressed, in which case the latent conflict probably grows more intense. That's the deal with conflict theory. We're not paying attention to anything that's outside of the organism. Right now, it's like within the heart, there is the potential for conflict because different cells don't like where they are. And within the liver, same thing. And within the spleen, same thing. The social structures are all kind of pregnant with the possibility of revolution. Okay, that's it for conflict theory. You got to know that it's always there, and it's the result of a power imbalance, and that different individuals occupy different positions depending on what social structure we're talking about. To wrap this whole thing up, and I mean the whole thing like this entire week, conflict theory is going to, in my opinion, do something good for us that neither of the other two did, which is draw our attention to the internal dynamics of a society, which is adding an element to general systems theory, which talks about, social structures evolving based on the external environment. If you put the two of them together, you get not a bad, again, not super analytical, but not a bad perspective of the way society works on the whole. And that's actually something Dahrendorf talked about. He said, when I'm doing conflict theory, I'm only doing half of it. I'm only doing half of social theory. It's hard, he said, to come up with a theory that encompasses everything. The structural functionalists, even Talcott Parsons, they're not dealing with any of the internal dynamics, the internal struggles for power. So Dahrendorf says, look, conflict theory is just half the thing. Structural functionalism is the other half of it. the place where I see a part of the reason that I think that we don't get analytical tools from this is that in none of them do we really have a good model of human beings. Structural functionalism and general systems don't even really deal with human beings at all. Conflict theory does, but it's me not really as a complex human being with agency. It's me as a person who occupies a position within a social structure, either superordinate or subordinate, and then just acts based on that position. I'm more of a vessel for conflict than I am a real human being. And I think that's part of why we don't get great analytical tools from this. But to take us back to all the way back to my introductory lecture on this, that's a limitation, clearly, but I don't think it means that we get nothing out of this. Just like you can study an animal and not and understand cool things about the animal based on observing its behavior without ever knowing anything about the cells that are inside that the animal is made of. I think we get something good about understanding society from that macro perspective. What we get from these grand theories is they give us interesting ways of thinking about a society on the whole, and also thinking about the structures within it and the roles that those structures play. Okay, that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to move on to some other grand-ish theories. I don't think they're quite as grand in the sense of being quite as detached from human experience as these ones are. And so hopefully we'll get some more analytical tools from these. But that's for another week. You guys made it through this one. I will see you next week.